You know exactly what you should do. You've thought about it, analyzed it, maybe even said it out loud. And then you do the same thing you always do. Not because you're weak, not because you lack willpower, but because your brain is running a program you didn't even know was installed. New research is changing how we understand repeated mistakes, and it turns out the problem isn't you, it's a feature built into human cognition itself. Picture this: you're at your regular coffee shop. Same counter, same barista, same moment of decision. What do you order? If you're like most people, you already know the answer. The same thing you ordered last time, and the time before that, and probably the time before that too. But here's what's strange. You might not even like it that much. You've noticed other options, thought about trying something new. Yet somehow your hand reaches for the familiar. In 2025, neuroscientists finally figured out why, and what they found surprised everyone, including themselves. For decades, psychologists assumed repeated bad decisions were failures of willpower, failures of self-control, failures to learn from experience. The thinking went something like this: people know what's good for them, and when they don't choose it, something must be wrong with their decision-making. This framework shaped how we treat addiction, compulsive behaviors, and everyday habits. We focused on building willpower, strengthening resolve, teaching people to resist temptation. But what if the basic assumption was wrong? What if repeated mistakes aren't failures of willpower at all, but something far more fundamental? A 2025 study published in Nature Communications Psychology tested 351 participants across 9 different decision-making tasks. What they discovered, it challenged everything. The researchers found what they called repetition bias. Humans have a powerful, built-in tendency to repeat actions they've taken before, regardless of whether those actions led to good outcomes. Here's the key finding. Decision biases that scientists previously attributed to how we calculate value, they're better explained by simple action repetition. In other words, you don't repeat that mediocre lunch order because you secretly value it. You repeat it because you repeated it before. The action itself creates a preference. Think about that for a moment. We've spent decades telling people their bad choices reflect some internal failing: poor judgment, lack of discipline, emotional weakness. But this research suggests something different. Your brain isn't failing. It's conserving energy. It's running an efficiency program that, most of the time, actually works pretty well. A separate study from the same research team examined 70 participants in sequential decision-making tasks. They used computational models to understand exactly what was happening. Their conclusion: human decisions are best explained by a combination of goal-directed reward-seeking and a separate tendency to simply repeat familiar action sequences, 2 systems running simultaneously. One tries to maximize rewards, the other just says, do what you did last time, and they're not always in agreement. So why would evolution build in a bias toward repetition? It seems almost counterproductive. Wouldn't it be better to always evaluate options fresh and choose the best one? The researchers have an answer. Repetition bias may serve as an adaptive strategy to reduce cognitive effort in complex decision environments. It's your brain's energy-saving mode. Think about it. Every decision requires cognitive resources: attention, analysis, comparison. If you had to fully evaluate every choice every time, you'd be exhausted by noon. So the brain developed a shortcut. If this situation looks familiar, and I've chosen something here before, just choose that again. Save the mental energy for decisions that actually require fresh thinking. The 2025 study found something critical. Higher within context repetition of an option was associated with increased subjective valuation. The more you repeat something, the more valuable your brain perceives it to be. And here's the twist. Repetition also lowered uncertainty about repeated actions. So not only do you value the familiar choice more, you feel more confident choosing it. This creates a self-reinforcing loop. Choose something. Feel good about the choice because it's familiar. Choose it again. Feel even more certain next time. And on it goes. The quote from the research team says it plainly. Many irrational preferences don't arise from people storing values relative to other values. They arise because people tend to repeat actions they once preferred in a particular context. Context matters enormously here. The same restaurant triggers your usual order. The same grocery store triggers your usual purchases. The same conflict triggers your usual response. But researchers discovered something else equally important. Not everyone responds to repetition bias the same way. They identified 3 distinct behavioral profiles. First, the sensitives. These people quickly recognize when a repeated pattern is causing problems. They notice the bad outcomes and they adjust. Their brains flag the repetition as failing. Second, the unawares. These people don't naturally notice the pattern, but once it's pointed out to them, they can change. They needed the insight, but once they have it, they adapt. And then, the compulsives. These individuals continued making the same bad decisions even after being shown exactly how their actions were causing the problem. Let that sink in. One group keeps making harmful choices even with full awareness of the consequences. They see the pattern. They understand it causes harm, and they do it anyway. This might sound discouraging, but understanding these profiles is actually crucial because it tells us that one-size-fits-all interventions for changing behavior don't work. If you're a sensitive, you might just need a better feedback system. Clearer signals that something isn't working. Your brain already wants to adjust. It just needs the data. If you are an unaware, external intervention helps. A coach, a therapist, a friend who can point out the pattern you're missing. Once you see it, you can break it. But if you're a compulsive, that's where things get complicated. The researchers found that simply providing information isn't enough. The repetition bias overrides conscious understanding. This has profound implications for how we think about addiction, compulsive disorders, and even everyday struggles with behavior change. It's not always a matter of knowing better. Some researchers argue this supports viewing certain problematic behaviors as neurological conditions rather than character failures. The brain is doing what brains do, not what we wish they would do. The 2025 research quote puts it starkly. Compulsives continued making the same bad decisions even after being shown exactly how their actions were causing the problem. This raises uncomfortable questions about free will and moral responsibility. If repetition bias is a fundamental brain mechanism, how much can we really blame people for their patterns? But here's where it gets practical. Understanding this mechanism gives us actual tools, not just willpower mantras, but strategies that work with the brain instead of against it. The first insight: context is everything. Your brain ties repeated actions to specific environments. Same place, same triggers, same automatic response. But change the context. You disrupt the loop. You might want to try this. When attempting to break a pattern, change where it happens. Different room, different time of day, different physical arrangement. Anything that tells your brain this is new. Here's a technique from the research. The 2-option pause. Before defaulting to your familiar choice, force yourself to generate at least one alternative. Just one. Name it out loud if you have to. The research suggests this simple act of generating alternatives forces deliberate consideration. It pulls you out of automatic repetition and into conscious choice, even if you pick the familiar option anyway. For the unawares among us, external feedback systems help enormously. A friend who will gently point out patterns, a journal where you track decisions and outcomes, some way to make the invisible visible. If you're someone who keeps returning to harmful patterns despite knowing better, consider seeking professional help. This research suggests compulsive repetition may require different intervention approaches than simple awareness. And here's something important for everyone around people stuck in repetitive patterns. If someone continues harmful choices despite understanding consequences, they may fall into the compulsive profile. That means lecturing them probably won't help. I know, hard to accept. But pushing more information at someone whose brain overrides information, that's not a strategy. That's just frustration for everyone. This research invites a different kind of compassion, not pity, not enabling, but genuine understanding that some repeated behaviors have neurological components we're only beginning to understand. The human brain is remarkably good at what it evolved to do: survive, conserve energy, navigate a complex world with limited resources. Repetition bias is part of that package. It's not a flaw, it's a feature that sometimes creates problems. Like any feature, it helps in some situations and hurts in others. The key is knowing when you're running on autopilot. So the next time you catch yourself making the same choice in a familiar situation, pause, not to judge yourself, but to ask, is this a deliberate decision or is my brain just hitting replay? If you found this research useful, hit subscribe. We explore the science behind human behavior every week, and a like genuinely helps more people find us. We've spent generations treating repeated mistakes as moral failures, weakness of character, lack of discipline. This research offers a different lens. Your brain isn't betraying you when it reaches for the familiar, it's trying to help. It's doing what millions of years of evolution taught it to do. The question is whether that help still serves you. Sometimes the shortcut saves energy. Sometimes it costs you something bigger. The first step is simply noticing which game you're playing. Thanks for being here. Until next time, pay attention to the patterns. They're telling you something.